The first time I found that secret spot, it didn't feel like discovery. It felt like stumbling into a dream. It was late afternoon in mid-June, the kind of golden day that makes even the mosquitoes seem lazy. I'd been hiking alone for 3 days along a seldom-used trail in the Smoky Mountains, somewhere between the familiar path and the unknown edge of the map. My goal was simple: make camp by a creek, cook a quiet dinner, and sleep under the stars. But nature, as it often does, had a better plan for me. The trail dipped into a hollow where the air turned cooler, heavy with the smell of wet ferns and moss-covered stone. I heard water long before I saw it, a soft, echoing murmur that grew steadier with every step. The map showed no major stream in that direction, just a dry wash from decades ago. But curiosity tugged at me harder than the weight of my pack. So I left the trail, pushing through a curtain of mountain laurel and rhododendron, the branches scraping my arms like they wanted to keep the place a secret. The sound of the water deepened, a rhythm now, like breath, like a heartbeat. The ground dropped sharply, forcing me to pick my way down through loose shale and tangled roots. When I finally broke through the underbrush, I stopped dead in my tracks. Before me, sunlight spilled through a narrow cleft in the rocks and lit up a pool of impossibly clear, turquoise blue water. It was no wider than a cabin living room, fed by a thin ribbon of a waterfall that tumbled 20 feet from the cliff above, scattering mist like crystal dust into the air. The water looked alive, cold and bright and inviting in a way that felt sacred. For a moment, I didn't move. I just listened. The sound of the falls mixed with the whisper of leaves and the faint call of a thrush deeper in the forest. It was the kind of quiet that hums, like the world holding its breath. I set down my pack, crouched at the edge and dipped my fingers in. The chill raced up my arm, but it felt clean, like touching the pulse of the earth itself. Not on any map that stings your skin, but clears your mind. I eased in slowly, feeling the pebbles shift under my feet until the water reached my waist, and then I went all the way under. For a moment, everything went silent except for the muted thunder of the waterfall. When I surfaced, I let out a gasp that turned into a laugh, the kind that bursts out when you realise you're the only person in the world who knows a secret like this. I swam to the far side of the pool, where the rock curved into a shallow cave. The walls were slick and green with moss, and behind the veil of falling water, I found a hollow space big enough to sit in. From there, looking out through the cascade, the forest looked like a painting. Sunlight, ripples, motion and calm all at once. I must have stayed there an hour, maybe 2, until the light began to soften into that warm, late-day gold that makes everything feel timeless. When I climbed back to shore, steam rose off my skin in the cool air, and I stretched out on a flat rock to dry, listening to the steady rush of the falls. Dinner was simple: beans, rice, a bit of jerky. But it tasted better than anything I'd eaten in weeks. I built a small fire and watched the flames dance while the waterfall glowed silver in the fading light. A pair of bats fluttered above, tracing lazy arcs through the dusk. I remember thinking that no photograph, no map, could ever capture what that place felt like. The hush of it, the purity. I didn't even write it down in my trail journal that night. Some places, I decided, aren't meant to be shared in ink. They're meant to stay wild, known only to those who happen upon them by chance, as if the forest itself chose to reveal them. That night, The forest sang me to sleep. The waterfall's steady rhythm blended with the low hoot of an owl somewhere beyond the ridge. And, every once in a while, a breeze would shiver through the trees, scattering a few pine needles across my tent fly. I woke once near midnight to the faint shimmer of moonlight filtering through the canopy. The pool below looked almost unreal, like a silver coin lying in the dark. The waterfall wisps of sunlight themselves. After I'd dried off and packed up camp, I hesitated before shouldering my pack. Part of me wanted to mark the spot somehow. A cairn, a carving, anything to remember the exact place. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. It felt wrong to claim it, like scratching your name into a church pew. So, I memorized the sound of the water, the smell of moss and pine, the angle of the sun filtering down between two split boulders. That would be enough. When I climbed back up the ridge, I glanced over my shoulder one last time. Already, the forest was closing around it, swallowing up my footprints, taking the secret back. By the time I reached the main trail again, the sound of the falls was gone, replaced by the rustle of wind through dry leaves. If I hadn't felt the chill of that water on my skin, I might have thought I'd imagined the whole thing. But deep down, I knew it was real. Somewhere beyond the map, tucked between two folds of wilderness, waiting for whoever was quiet enough to listen. The rest of that day, I hiked in a kind of trance. My boots found their rhythm on the trail, but my mind stayed behind at that hidden pool. Every bend in the path, every rustle of leaves brought back the memory of sunlight glinting on that turquoise water. The forest seemed different now, friendlier somehow, like it had accepted me as part of its story. I passed a group of hikers around midday, cheerful and talkative, their maps flapping in the wind. They asked if there was anything interesting up ahead. I almost told them. The words sat right on the edge of my tongue. But then I thought about that place, quiet and untouched, and I just smiled. Mostly woods, I said, but it's beautiful. By late afternoon, clouds gathered low and heavy. The air thickened with that electric stillness that comes before a summer storm. I quickened my pace, hoping to reach a ridge before the rain. But halfway up the slope, thunder rolled in the distance, echoing through the hollows. I found a thick spruce to shelter under just as the sky opened, enough to warm a pot of soup, but the flames flickered high enough to light the nearest trees. I leaned back against a log, my clothes still damp, and stared out at the mountains layered like shadows on the horizon. Somewhere out there, down in the folds of forest, that secret cove still shimmered unseen, untouched. I wondered how many had walked right past it, never hearing its whisper, and how many more might someday stumble into it, the way I did, by accident, or by fate. The next morning broke clear and calm, the kind of blue sky dawn that feels like a promise. I packed slowly, not wanting to leave the mountains just yet. The forest was quiet after the storm. Only the distant call of a jay and the soft drip of rainwater from the branches. When I stepped back onto the trail, I felt lighter somehow, like the woods had taken something heavy from me and left something better in its place. As the miles slipped by, I thought about all the trips I'd taken before. Long hikes, tough climbs, places I'd planned for months. Yet none of them had held that same quiet magic as the hidden pool. It wasn't marked on any guide, not even hinted at on the old topographic maps I'd studied. It existed outside the world of names and numbers, belonging only to the forest. Maybe that's what made it so perfect. It wasn't found so much as given. A rare moment of grace for those willing to stray off the well-worn path. By the time I reached the trailhead, the sun was high and the heat was pressing down again. I threw my pack in the truck and stood for a long while, staring back at the tree line. It felt like leaving an old friend, someone you know you might never see again, but will always carry with you. I didn't take a photo, didn't drop a pin, didn't tell a soul. Some things lose their magic the moment you try to hold them too tight. Years have passed since that day, and I've hiked 100 trails since, from deserts to alpine lakes. But whenever I smell wet moss, or hear water falling in the distance, something inside me stirs. A small, knowing